It seems like everyone has takes on the future of Marvel Snap, so let's talk about them. Marvel Snap's early series need to be skippable for the long-term health of the game. They stop players, especially seasoned card game players, from being able to play the fun, complex game they see online until they do months and months of what amounts to busy work. I do think that that is one of the major issues that Marvel Snap has in terms of enfranchised card game players. I know, like, someone like Life Coach, it's like, okay, I would pay $1,000 for all the cards, but I can't do that. I have to do the busy work. And I think part of the issue that a lot of people may have with Marvel Snap is that it forces you to play the collection game before you can play the card game, right? And while you're playing the collection game, you're playing a much more simplified, easy, I guess, version of Marvel Snap. Like, you're still playing Marvel Snap. I look back at my days in Pool 1 fondly. I enjoyed them a lot. But there is a degree to which, if I wanted to go to play Friday Night Magic, I could go buy a Magic deck, and then I would have the Magic deck, and then I could play the Magic deck. And in Marvel Snap, there's no way for me to say, go just start the game up and buy a good deck and start playing good players. I have to work my way through all of this. So I do think that is an issue. I don't know if it's the foremost issue facing Marvel Snap, but it is an issue in terms of especially something like competitive integrity that probably I would love to see solved in the future. It's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know if that's the kind of thing that's on their priority list, but I really wish that it was. Shifting the game towards decks that do their thing, ships passing in the night, is net negative for the game. Pushing strategies that just play card A, B, C, D and do their thing just leads to games where you retreat and accept you can never win instead of building counterplay. I actually agree with this 100%. It's one of the most worrying things that I heard in my interview with Glenn Jones, who is the lead balance guy for Second Dinner. He said he enjoyed it when decks were just doing their thing, and the person who does the bigger thing is the person who wins the game. And I think that is a little bit short-sighted, but I also get the sense that maybe he means it in a different sense than we might interpret it. I don't think he wants every deck to be Onslaught, Living Tribunal, or Hela, or whatever. I think he wants there to be some representation of that, but it doesn't have to be the meta. The meta can still be other things, but I think I definitely do worry about a world in which, he meant what he said literally, where it's like, all right, I just want it to be like, all right, you're playing a Patriot deck. I'm playing a deck that's bigger Patriot deck. You lose every single time. I do think that is a bad world to be in. Luckily, I do think we can look back on the past year and say that doesn't seem to be the direction they actually want to go in. They want those decks to be around, and Hela is around, Living Tribunal is around. These are decks that are around. And I actually, Johnson, one of my favorite players in the entire game, top forward the Rainbow Snap Clash with a Living Tribunal deck as part of his lineup. It looked like complete garbage, but he absolutely got there. You can do it with these linear decks. And I think that that is very important that those options exist. I do not think the entire metagame should be ships passing in the night, but I think, sometimes it's okay. I genuinely have no complaints about this game. Last game I was in has a dead competitive scene, a lack of content creators and viewers, and was always snarky towards me. While I am curious how a game can be snarky towards you, that seems hard to do. But I am curious. Please let me know in the comments, like, how a game was being snarky towards you. It's like, it's a very modern thing. I can't really picture it. I do think that it's good that some people are just happy with the game they're playing. That said, I mean, I'm happy with Marvel Snap. I'm a big fan of the game, obviously. But I do think there's things that can be fixed. And, like, my constant feedback stream is always, make it cheaper. Make it cheaper. It can always be cheaper. And I get it, it's a bit repetitive. People will hate to hear that there's a certain type of person that will be like, well, they can't just make everything cheaper. And I do know that, but I don't want to sacrifice the negotiating position, which is, I do think everything should be cheaper. I understand that they are, they need to make money. They're a company. I get it. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't ask for things to be cheaper just because it probably won't happen. it's still important to like frame things in terms of, new player acquisition, keeping the game affordable, keeping a fresh stream of players who can achieve what I've achieved in the Snap. I think one of the things that worries me the most about Marvel Snap's long-term longevity is how hard it is for a content creator to get into the game without having already been invested in it. When you look at the content creators who are around after a year, it is almost all people who started in the beta or who started at the very beginning of the open launch and spent a lot of money. That actually does worry me in terms of someone who is, I am generally someone who wants to sort of spread that love. A rising tide lifts all boats. And it sucks that it's hard to get new blood in here, because you try selling someone who streams another game on streaming Marvel Snap. Yeah, just spend, $2,000, you'll be fine. Like, that's not an easy sell, right? You spend $2,000 or you spend 6 months. This goes back to the original, the first thing we talked about, which is like, getting someone to a competitive level takes either a lot of time or a lot of money, and usually it's both. And I do think that negatively impacts the landscape for creators. It privileges it towards those of us who spent a lot of money, had a lot of time, and ended up investing early. It's very difficult to use your creativity in the game. The meta doesn't adhere to homebrewed decks. I think this is cope. I'm going to be honest with you. I think this is cope. I'm going to name check 2 players here. Cleanup 141 and Yo Woody are consistently playing just absolutely off the wall stuff. Big Baby was like rank 5 in the world, playing the worst deck I've ever seen. Clearly that means it's not the worst deck I've ever seen. I think Marvel Snap has more emphasis on catching people off guard with off-meta stuff, actually, because of the way the Snap system works. If they don't know what you're doing and you do, you have a huge advantage. I actually think that there is more room for Marvel Snap for high-level experimentation with success than in any other card game that I've played. It is a very consistent theme. And Yo Woody, Big Baby, Cleanup, these are people who are in the top 20 consistently on and off with decks that are never on my tier list, that are absolutely off meta, and that are targeted at the decks on my tier list. Black Panther is the only season card that hasn't been adjusted to be good, and it should be buffed just like the rest of the underperforming season cards. So, first of all, just baseline, that's not true. Dakin, Nebula, just off the top of my head. I know there's a couple more too. So let's start with the basics here. Not a true statement at the beginning of this. That said, I mean, if you wanted to talk about a Black Panther buff, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, right? But it's just like, is that very exciting? You buff back Black Panther, and then it's like, oh, it's a 5/5, and now you do the same stuff with it, and instead of getting a 32/32 when you Wong, you get a 40/40. It's not changing the card. Like, it's the same dynamics are going to be at play here. And I don't really see, like, when you go like Wong Zola on this, it's still going to be arbitrarily large. That was kind of the reason you played in the first place. I don't really see what you'd want to do with the card. I think it has a very defined identity, and making it stronger would just make it stronger in that identity. And especially as a card whose job is to get arbitrarily large and just instantly win a lane. It already does that when you pull off the combo, so I don't really know why you'd want it to do that more. High Evo decks, the one deck that has never dropped in meta and has always been consistent ever since his release. Boy, that ain't true. I mean, High Evo has gone through some serious ups and downs. When it first came out with old Spider-Man, I would say it was the best deck in the game, and it wasn't even close. It was good in Thanos too, although I will say that was a lot worse than the Spider-Man build. After Spider-Man got nerfed, it was still a functional to good tier 1, 2-ish deck. And since then, it has been, in and out. There's been good high Evo decks, but I don't think I would say it's consistently been tier 1, especially post-Loki. Like, people would play high Evo wave into Loki, and they'd lose every time you played the card Loki on 4, and it was just, not a reliable strategy outside of, I would say, lower ranks. It's just the kind of thing you cannot get away with at high infinite or even various portions of lower infinite. I think that was the last time High Evo was good. Like, he's been, kind of okay. And it's good that a sort of signpost archetype, like, you get High Evo, you get some decks. Like, that's good. He's still good enough to buy because of that. But I do think that, he's been in and out, but I would say he's been anywhere from tier 1 to tier 3. And after the nerfs, I think he's mostly been out of tier 1, would be how I would say it. So, I mean, depending on how you look at it, this could be true. I think it's overstating High Evolutionary just a little bit. The best hot takes have to make the video? Nah, man, I'm good. So, sometimes when people leave, like, mean comments on my videos, and to be clear, I redacted the name for a reason. Please don't go look for this person. But sometimes when people leave mean comments on my videos, I check their profile and just to see what kind of person I have made angry. And I found this is the first post on this person's profile. So I will come to you if I ever need advice on the intersection of Marvel Snap and cryptocurrency. Sorry, but infinite rank is easy to get. You simply need to understand the concept of snapping and retreating. If you still can't get it after a few seasons of playing, it's not the deck you're using or the matchmaking, it's you. Yes. Generally speaking, I wouldn't even necessarily call this a hot take. I think that this is basically saying, rank in Marvel Snap is something of an indicator of skill. It's also something of an indicator of time. And the fact that you are blaming matchmaking instead of looking to improve is likely a barrier to you improving. Yeah, sure. No, that seems true to me. What I will say, though, is you say infinite is easy to get. You just need to understand the concept of snapping and retreating. And that's like saying, oh, it's easy to win money in poker. You just need to understand the concept of raising and folding. And it's like, that's actually quite complicated. It's actually not something I would call simple. It's very difficult and contextual. And I think maybe instead of being like, it's so easy, you're an idiot, I do go out of my way to like sort of break those barriers down that people build up to protect their egos in terms of saying, there's excuses for why their rank isn't the way that it is. And I also do try to apply those to myself as well. And that said, Marvel Snap's a pretty hard game, and getting good at it is hard, and you should congratulate people when they do things that are hard. People that complain about cards being bullshit are just mad because it beat their current bullshit. Games like this are about making your bullshit better than their bullshit. But what you're trying to do is just as much bullshit as the bullshit that beat you. So, on the one hand, yes, like there is a lot of, guy who always picks paper says that scissors needs to be nerfed in Marvel Snap discourse, but I don't think that means you're unable to have an opinion on balance, right? Like, oh, I lose to Elsa, therefore I can't complain about Elsa because Elsa is clearly balanced. I'm just not bullshitting properly. Like, no, there are actual balance outliers. There is a sort of nebulous shared understanding of exactly how good a card can or cannot be, and that is generally enforced by the second inner balance team. So while I do think there is a fair bit of, guy who plays rock complains about paper, guy who plays paper complains about scissors, there is some of that. I don't think it should make you feel like you should not be able to have a voice in balanced discussions, especially. That said, I mean, yeah, that is one of the copes that people tend to use to protect their egos if they're not having success, but it can also be true. That is why it is so attractive as cope, is that it can actually be true some of the time. Jeff needs a nerf. His ability to move after being played puts him over the top and renders Nightcrawler obsolete. Take that away, being able to play him everywhere is already strong enough. God, I don't agree with the way it was said here, but Jeff is very clearly the best 2-cost card. And if you're second dinner, how do you design a 2-cost card going forward that people will want to play over Jeff, right? Like, I do think that's a real consideration. I don't think you need to, like, get rid of his move or anything like that. I just think, there is some consideration saying, like, look, this guy is way better than everything else at this slot. And I think it's a little harder to be way better than everything else at something like 2 then it's something like 6. And I'll give you a reason why. So if you look at 6, it's like Doctor Doom is way better than everything else. But there's a bunch of other sort of conditional 6s that can be better than Doctor Doom in certain spots, right? And those spots are like, Magneto in a Darkhawk meta, Alioth when you're doing priority shenanigans, or something like Orca when you're only playing one card in a lane, or something like, America Chavez. Like, there's a lot of different reasons to run a 6, but Jeff actually is just like that much better than all the 2s. And because 2s are a much more limited range in terms of, the numbers you can put on them, the abilities you can give them, they can't be too good. And that means that Jeff is sort of the upper end of how good a 2 can be. And it's hard to create like an archetype based 2 that is better than Jeff in its archetype because Jeff is so good. So I do wonder about this one, honestly. I do think this one is like, more realistic than you might think. Where Jeff, I like, if I'm second dinner, I'm a little bit worried about the guy. I don't want to nerf him, but like, it's like, okay, like, geez, this is making it kind of difficult to think about things, because I can think of a million 6 drops that you could release that could be contextually better than Doctor Doom, but not always better than Doctor Doom. But 6 has so much more of a range, and 2 is very constricted in terms of the kind of stuff you can put there, and I think that might actually be a problem. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for submitting your hot takes. I really appreciate it. As always, remember to like and subscribe if you like this. Leave comments, please, with your further hot takes. And of course, thank you so much for making it this far. I have been KM Best. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.